Alrighty, well today we have on Mr. Mason King. He is a civics teacher at Carroll County Middle School. He coaches swim and football. Mr. King, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing good.
Thank you for coming out and being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's pretty cool what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think I can speak for both me and Ethan. It's an honor to have you here. Ethan knows you more than I do.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever met before.
Maybe not. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And it's been a few years since I was in middle school. So.
Yeah.
But we're very, very excited to have you on.
Yeah. Cool deal.
Well, to start out, we always ask the same question. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a little town called Ulmer, South Carolina. It's in Allendale County down in the Low State. I think we were about 45 minutes from Charleston and Savannah. Okay. But the county I grew up in is really rural. My dad was a state trooper down there. So we grew up down there, moved to Carroll in 2005.
Okay.
It was about halfway through my 7th grade year. So like I say, I grew up down there, but I also grew up here a fair amount too.
Was the area down there smaller than it is here?
Population-wise, I think the county only had about 2,000 people in it.
Wow.
Okay.
A lot of farmland. But yeah, it's, I moved here and I remember saying, I remember people telling me that, oh, there's nothing to do here. And I'm like, you got more than where I came from. So
how old were you when you did move here?
I was 12.
Okay.
No, I would have been 13. So 2005, I would have been 13. And we moved in January.
Okay.
And that was pretty cool because, in the Low State in South Carolina, it's pretty hot. It's really flat. We had visited Virginia. My great-grandparents lived in Bedford County.
Okay.
And my grandma grew up in Bedford, but then they eventually, I think my mom and my grandma, they grew up in Greensboro mainly. Yeah. But it was a huge adjustment moving up here.
No kidding, yeah.
Yeah.
Was it snow on the ground when you came?
Well, it snowed the night we moved in,
wow,
which was crazy. I'd never seen snow.
Oh, really?
I remember we had a Suburban that in the rear view mirror there was a little temperature gauge, and as soon as we hit the mountain around Cana, we just watched it drop, and I think it was 11 degrees that night. We moved in, got our beds in because it was late, and got some essential stuff in, and then the next morning there was snow on the ground.
Right.
We had a giant U-Haul truck, and the house we lived in was in Woodlawn, and there was a really steep driveway. A Suburban was 2-wheel drive. The U-Haul truck was 2-wheel drive, so we got stuck our first night living in Woodlawn. So
did you go out and play in the snow?
We didn't the first time it snowed. I think the second time it snowed, we went out and tried to sled. We had to go buy. I remember going to Harmon's, and we had to buy, jeans and long johns because, Low State, South Carolina, even in December and January, could be in the 50s and 60s. Very rarely did it get below freezing. So we had to buy winter clothes, go out and play in the snow. So.
At that age, that's a pretty big adjustment for a kid moving from a big move like that. Did you adjust pretty well to it?
I think I did worse than my sisters did. I was when my parents told us we were moving, I remember thinking that it was the end of the world. I was 7th grade. I was 12 years old. It's pretty settled where I was.
Right.
But we also, the other big adjustment, we were homeschooled.
Oh, wow.
In South Carolina. So we started public school in August of 2005. So we finished up our homeschooling stuff, pretty much the second semester of that year. And then we started public school for the first time. I started in 8th grade. So
was that the intermediate school at the time?
It was the intermediate school. It was 8th and 9th grade. And I can remember, at that time, you had all your elementary schools funneled to Woodlawn. And Woodlawn was 6th and 7th grade, I believe. But there's also a huge portion still down at St. Paul.
Right.
And so all the kids that I met, I remember them, are you from Cana or are you from Hillsville or Woodlawn? So everybody was still getting to know each other in that 8th grade year.
It worked out.
It worked out. It was perfect timing for me.
Right.
My sister started 7th grade in Woodlawn, and then my youngest sister started 5th grade at Fancy Gap. So.
What motivated your family to move here?
So my mom's family was from Bedford, and we had visited. We would come up on Christmas or Thanksgiving, and Mom had always wanted to move back to Virginia.
Yeah.
My dad wasn't really sold on it because he didn't really want to live near her family. So I always make this joke that, Dad crossed the state line and said, "Oh, here we go. Stop here." We got into Virginia and then ended up in Carroll. Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, so your family moved to be closer to family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad had retired from the state police, and so once he had retired, he was ready to make the move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk about homeschooling versus public school? Because you're a public school teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't heard many public school teachers that were actually homeschooled. Can you talk about what it's like to be homeschooled and the differences between that and public school?
So with me, homeschooling was great for me. I like the fact that I could just get up, and we had some routine when we were younger, but as we got older, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, it was pretty much, you got the groundwork, then it was more independent work.
Yep.
So I was pretty independent for most things except for math. I had to have, Mom a lot of times would have to stay with me and get me to do my math.
Yeah.
It was funny that she would set a kitchen timer up. She's like, "You've got to get this done in this amount of time," because I was so used to just kind of doing things on my own time. She knew I wouldn't do it if she didn't put that timer there. And then when me and my wife got married, she gave my wife a timer. Said, "You'll need this."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But I liked homeschooling. I didn't know any better. I was homeschooled from 1st grade to 7th grade. I did go to kindergarten. And the kindergarten that I went to was a county over. And they had changed some rule right as I was getting out of kindergarten that, you've got to go to school where you live, where your address is. The school system in the county that I lived in was not great. It was a pretty rough school system. My older brother went through, and they just, they had a real bad experience with it. So Mom said, "Well, we'll just homeschool."
Yeah.
Now I think the biggest thing that, shocked me was when I came to public school, how helpful the teachers were.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why I became a teacher, is because of how great the teachers were at the middle school that I had. So,
What curriculum did you follow when you were doing homeschool?
it was, I can't even remember the name. It was something, I think it was through our church, but it was still state curriculum, so it was still stuff we had to do.
Yeah.
I can remember going to testing facility, so we still had standardized tests, but
Yeah.
I think that's just how they prove that you're actually doing work.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Did you have some discretion or leeway that you could move around and stuff that you're more interested in? Because I've always been interested in that.
Yeah.
Kind of focusing on.
We've interviewed several people who have been homeschooled, and they said that they were really able to pursue what they were interested in, maybe history, and still get their necessities down in math, but they didn't have to focus on it so heavily.
Sheriff Kemp was a homeschool.
No.
He was in a
Christian.
smaller program, and he really had that leeway to kind of focus on what he
He
wanted
said it was
to do.
tough though.
yeah, what I remember mainly was, we had about an equal amount of work in every category. I remember having a social studies book, a math book, a science book, a language arts book, and a Bible book. We had a religion component to it. And that was, they were all pretty equally spaced, and we had to do work in all of them. But I will say, I think one of the biggest benefits to homeschooling was all the trips that we got to take. We'd go to Civil War reenactments a lot, and that's kind of that was my interest. That's what we got to focus on.
Right.
We'd go to museums a lot. Go to the one in Columbia, or the zoo. We got to go to the zoo a lot as a kid. I think having that, extra time to go out and see other things, so we weren't completely just stuck at home. We had a lot more time to do things like that. Yeah.
When you initially came to the public school system, were there any rough spots that you had to adjust to?
Oh, bell schedules.
Bells, yeah.
Yeah, and how to use a locker.
Oh, yeah.
Being prepared for class. Using that time in between class to get your stuff and go where you need to be. Learning the building. That was, it was a little bit easier back then because there wasn't the 6th grade wing. It was pretty much just the 2 loops.
Right.
I think, and then just knowing that, when you're in a class, you've got to do what you got to do during that time, and that's all you've got, So.
It has to be kind of reminiscent to be teaching in the same building that you went to school in.
Yeah.
It's really fun. There's a few teachers still there that I had. Miss Nestor, the algebra teacher.
Yeah, we had her.
She was my Math 8 teacher. It's cool to see a different side of your teachers. I had Miss Hendrick. She was a 8th grade science teacher. I'm trying to think. There might have been a few more there, but most of them that I remember were my 9th grade teachers, and they're all up at the high school. Some of them are still there, but yeah.
So you graduate from the intermediate school, and you go to high school.
Mm-hmm.
Were you nervous for high school? Because a lot of times high school is depicted in movies or books as this big, scary, awful place where people bully you. Did you find that to be true?
I don't think so. I think, by having the intermediate school with 8th and 9th grade, I think that's, even 9th graders, that's still, when you're a 9th grader in high school now, you're the, lowest on the totem pole.
Right.
But as a 9th grader at the intermediate school, you kind of walk, you had a little bit more pride,
Mm-hmm.
You're the oldest, you were in 9th grade. But then by 10th grade, I think that kind of levels out.
Yeah.
With, the kids that are seniors are only 2 years older than you.
Mm-hmm.
And by 10th grade, you're getting ready for your learners. I think there's maturity-wise, you're a little bit different in 10th grade than being a freshman.
Yeah.
So.
Do you feel that homeschooling academically prepared you for the public school system?
Yeah, I think it did. That's the biggest thing I remember is having so much attention, especially in elementary years, learning to write, reading. I read a lot when I was younger.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore, but I think having those skills by the time you get to middle and high school sets you up.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know if I'd say I was ahead, but I know that as far as reading level and my math, I was pretty well set.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't struggle in any of my classes. I made, A's and B's. Made a C in chemistry, Mr. Mitchell's class.
Yeah. He told me to ask you a chemistry question. We might save that for later.
Oh my gosh. Well, all right, we'll talk about that one later.
Yeah.
You mentioned books. What books were you interested in?
I used to read the Magic Treehouse series.
Yeah.
And Goosebumps. I couldn't turn down a Goosebumps book. The Harry Potter series.
Yeah.
I feel like there was probably some more series books that we read. I used to really like, we had a mobile library that, was basically a bus that they would come by our house.
Yeah.
And that was always a treat. And I remember getting a lot of history books, a lot of the infographic ones with a lot of pictures and some articles. But
DK, were you interested in
that
those?
might be it.
Yeah, I loved those when I was a kid too.
Yeah.
So, I personally know that you play football and you swim in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit about your decision to start playing sports and when did you start?
Yeah, so I never played sports when we were in South Carolina. No rec sports, nothing like that. And then when we moved up here, I had, told my dad I really wanted to play football. And so we got here and we got involved in a church and I met some other guys that, we're doing summer workouts. I was like, I want to do that. I got to get a hold of that. So talked to them and then started that August at the middle school and played all through high school. And then, fortunately was good enough to go play in college. So it was fun.
And do you swim in the summers with the Tiger Sharks?
So when I swam, there wasn't a high school team. It was just the Tiger Sharks.
Just 2 years old.
I was the oldest kid on the team because by the time we got hooked up with that, I think I was a junior in high school. I just swam my junior and senior year.
Okay.
So my sisters both swam too. One sister's just a year younger than me, and then the other one's 2 years. So they got more out of it, I think, than I did. Our football coach was big on playing 2 sports, and I didn't want to wrestle, and I didn't want to do basketball, and I had to find something to preoccupy my time after football.
Right.
So during the summer, I did swim. Yeah.
Did you ever think about track?
No, running too.
A lot of football players will do like a
The-
shot put or discus.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of those things where I just didn't know anything about track. I had, and I don't remember having more than 2 or 3 friends that ran track, and I don't know, I wasn't at the forefront of my mind.
Who was the football coach then?
Tom Hale.
Tom Hill.
Tom
Okay.
Hale. He's getting inducted into the Hall of Fame.
It's tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And was Roseanne the swim coach?
No. So our swim coach was. Let me think. So there was a lot of adults always around, and I can't. And I know when I first started, I couldn't tell you who the coach was, but my junior and senior year, our coach was a woman named Nancy Blevins.
Okay.
She her husband was actually my kicking coach, and so that's I was a kicker when I played football,
Right.
and they were the ones that actually kind of put me on swim too because of a lot of the workouts that we did were water aerobics style workouts, flexibility and resistance and things like that. So his wife was the swim coach my junior and senior year. So.
When did you realize that you had a talent for football and specifically kicking?
It took a while because I wasn't that good in the beginning. Most of your kickers are soccer players.
Okay.
So I started this and was already kind of at a disadvantage because I just didn't have that strength and power. So I was an accurate kicker. I just didn't have a very strong leg. I started kicking in 9th grade because in 8th grade I was like a left guard and a defensive end. I was playing the line, and I was way too small to be playing the line. And I didn't, starting in 8th grade and not having any idea. I know how the rules work, but I didn't really know how the positions worked.
Right.
So I'm trying to learn how to play this position that I'm already too small for. And then that was kind of a bummer. I didn't enjoy that. But then I met Doug Blevins, who was the kicking coach that I mentioned, and he showed me how. And then once I got started with it, I realized, I was like, oh yeah, I could do this. This is, it took a couple of years, but I eventually got the hang of it.
What was that process like from kicking it inaccurately to kicking good enough to play in college? Did you have specific workouts or activities that you did?
Yeah, workouts and just learning that, foot placement on the ball. I think, soccer players would know this, but, when most people go to kick a ball, they're going to kick it with their toe, right? The point of your foot. And kicking a football, you have to kick it with the top of your foot. So, point your toe down and give it a flatter surface. Soccer players know that, but learning that, once I got that, then I got the rest of the mechanics.
Yeah.
And then it just came down to flexibility. I had to stretch before and after workouts, before and after you kick. Because, you can be the strongest person in the world, but, if you don't have that flexibility, your ball's not going to go far.
Was it flexibility in your foot or?
Hamstrings,
Hamstrings,
really.
okay.
My hamstrings, that was the biggest thing.
So just get your knee high up. Okay.
Soccer players, and I've coached kickers now, soccer players will make contact with the ball and their leg immediately stops because they're trying to keep the ball down on the field. But, with kicking, you've got to swing your leg all the way up to get height. And so that flexibility really played a part in that.
So when did you start thinking about playing football in college? Was that your senior year? Or?
I think, once I met Doug Blevins, that was kind of the goal once I met him. We'll tell you a little bit about him.
Yeah.
He's born with cerebral palsy,
Wow.
and he's in a wheelchair, and he's never kicked a football in his life.
Wow.
So his brother, they're from Abingdon. His brother was a kicker, and so he watched his brother go through school, and then he started reading all of this information about other kickers and how it works and the mechanics, and so he just learned it without ever having done it. And so he, when I met him, he had been a coach at the Miami Dolphins. He's worked for the NFL teams, Miami Dolphins, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Dallas Cowboys. And some of his clients would have been Justin Tucker, Adam Vinatieri, Janikowski, I can't remember, Sebastian Janikowski. So he's worked with all these NFL kickers, and I saw that as like, oh, okay, so he's going to get me somewhere.
Yeah. How did he end up in Carroll County?
So he's from Abingdon. He's moved and lived all over the place. I really don't know how he ended up in Carroll specifically. I think he and Eddie Ayers were pretty good friends or acquaintances and knew each other.
Okay.
And then maybe Eddie probably put him on living in Carroll.
Yeah.
Now, did Mr. Ayers, did he ever do anything with the NFL? Because I remember him going to training camps or something.
I think he did. He's probably been to camps and stuff. I started working with Eddie and Doug. Probably, realistically, I think I spent more time with Eddie. But, Doug was around. But, Eddie's two sons, they kicked. And so I was in with good people, so that's what helped.
Was team success a part of the recruiting process, or was it more individualistic?
I think it had to be, and I'm not sure about all this, but I know that, for Carroll County being kind of where it is, it's hard to get looks from colleges. But I think, our team, when I played, we were pretty successful. We were usually about an 8 or 9 win team. My senior year, my varsity years. I think that helped.
Yeah. Did you reach out to the Emory coaching staff, or did they reach out to you?
So they reached out to me, and it's funny too. Emory reached out. Averett University in Danville, they reached out. Guilford College, Greensboro. I'm trying to think. There was a bunch of D3 schools, Farron, but I was 17 years old and full of myself, and I remember telling my dad, I was like, if I'm going to play college football, I want it to feel like college football. So you go visit and you see these small stadiums, that was just me being dumb.
Yeah.
But I was like, I kind of don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And so then UVA Wise got a hold of me, and I went and toured their campus and did a tryout. They wanted me to do a tryout, and it didn't work out. They had an AstroTurf field. Which was, it's not field turf like Galax has that field turf field. AstroTurf was carpet, basically. Okay. It had no cushion. You couldn't wear cleats on it.
Oh.
So I had to buy a pair of indoor soccer cleats to learn how to kick on this field. And it threw off everything. Yeah. And so I had a bad tryout. And they told me that they wanted to do what's called a gray shirt. It's a step below a red shirt. A red shirt, you're just sitting out for a year until you get better. Yeah. The gray shirt is like 2 years. And I was like, okay, I don't know. Maybe this isn't it. Yeah. So then I went back to Emory, and I worked during their summer camps and got on with them. Yeah.
Excellent. Did you like Emory's stadium size? Is that what
well, at that point, it sounds bad. I was like, I'll just take whatever I can get, know? Yeah. But out of all of the schools that I toured, Emory was by far, I think, the most welcoming. Yeah. You meet all the staff members and the other coaches and stuff, and I really enjoyed, all the people, all the coaches that I met. And
I've heard that from a lot of people.
We have a friend that's Ethan Dalton.
Yeah.
He's running cross country and track at Emory, and he loves the same thing you said. He says he actually reached out to them, and got on running cross country up there. But he says it's a small atmosphere. He said everybody's really, really nice and easy to work with. So
let's flip back to academics. Did you consider yourself to be very academic in school?
Probably not. No. My parents' rule was that they knew that what I was capable of, and the rule was that I could never make a C. Yeah. They expected all A's and B's, and that's what I got. Yeah. Made a C in 8th grade science, made a C in Mr. Mitchell's chemistry class. Only 2 C's I made.
At the time, was his chemistry class AP, or how did that work? And I believe the high school used to be on a period format, right?
Well, we had blocks when I was there.
My dad said that when he was there, they did a 7-period day. So I was wondering when that happened.
I don't know. I graduated in 2010, so I would have taken chemistry my junior year. So 08, 09 school year.
Was it dual enrollment?
No, it was just chemistry.
Chemistry.
Yeah. Okay. I don't even think it was an honors chemistry. I think it was just a regular chemistry class.
Was it a full year class or a semester?
Yeah.
Okay, because now his classes, it's pretty legendary now with how it's long and it's a dual enrollment class. So you're getting, I think it's 6 credits out of it.
Yeah.
8.
So he really
It's lab science.
Okay, so he really pumps it.
Yeah.
But I think we know a lot of people that take his class.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what taking his classes like?
Yeah, I just remember it being difficult, and I don't remember it, my grade being anybody's fault but mine. Mm-hmm. I think he was pretty good about explaining why, and then I could never be mad at him, I lost my driver's license for a little bit.
Oh.
My sister. Now, my parents said, oh, well, you've got the C, They told me, they warned me, I wasn't supposed to get any C's. Right. But, with my sister only being a year younger than me, I think they used that as an excuse to let her drive some. So I lost my driver's license for a couple of months, and my sister had to drive me to school. So
wow.
That was enough embarrassment. So I didn't.
Mr. Mitchell did ask me to ask you a chemistry question.
Okay.
And that is, what is the 18th group on the periodic table called?
I don't even know.
Luke?
Oh, God. Hold on. I know there's alkaline. No, it's not alkaline earth metals.
No, that's the first.
No, the 18th group is going to be...
It's the farthest end on the right.
It's not noble gases.
Are they radio?
It's noble gases.
Noble gases.
Noble gases. Okay, so very close. Very close.
Oh, well.
I had to do it. He asked me to.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's not...
I don't know if he's told you this story too, but he could probably tell you more about it, because I can't even remember the chemicals that I was mixing. But at the end of the year, he used to do a chemistry show where he would set up some of the experiments that he would do.
Is that the elementary schools?
No, he did it in his class.
Oh.
But he would invite parents to come see some of these chemical reactions, and I couldn't tell you what the chemicals were, but there was a small dish of a powder. And then there was a jug of it was liquidy, but it was really syrupy, really thick. Mm-hmm. And there was I don't think there were any measurements, but my job was to pour a little bit of this into this powder, and then it lights on fire. Mm. And I can remember pouring it, and where it was so thick, I couldn't get it to come out. And so a bunch of it all came out at once, and it spilled over, and it caused this big, huge fire. Oh, it was a mess.
Mm-hmm. He has a list of all the students he's ever taught.
Really?
And you're on the list, obviously. And when I mentioned your name, his face lit up. Yeah. He says, he used to be our star kicker at the high school. And then he pulled out his list on his computer.
Yeah.
And he see? And he's did that with multiple names that I've mentioned.
That is wild. To keep a record of all of that.
Yeah. Because he's been teaching there for...
almost 30 years.
Yeah.
I think 20... This will be 27.
Yeah. So, did you have Miss Scode, Yvonne Goad?
Yeah, I did. I had Miss Scode.
Okay. She's probably one of the best math teachers I ever had.
Yeah, so
she's good.
I had her for Algebra 2.
Okay.
There was an SOL in that class. Another funny story is I was in that class with, a bunch of older kids, a bunch of kids that were trying to get that math credit, so, not the brightest kids. And so I'm in that class, and I'm just getting by, and never had any issues with class. I was always good at math. I didn't like it, but math was easy to figure out. Yeah. If you know how it works, then it's... I didn't enjoy it, but I was good at it.
I understood it.
Yeah. So we took our SOL. She's calling everybody back to the desk one at a time. She gets to mine, and I made I want to say like a 590 or 590. I was like 1 or 2 questions away from the 600. And I was like, "Are you sure? is that my score? I didn't think I could score that high." Yeah. And she's like, "Yeah, that's your score."
Well, that's awesome.
Great teacher.
Oh yeah.
I think she's been teaching there since the late 70s.
Yeah. Wow. She has like the years she's been working on her door, because at the high school now, I guess administration has pushed this thing where the teachers have their class schedule on the door, and then like a little background about themselves in a picture.
Yeah, we have that too at the middle school.
Yeah. But she said that she worked at the middle school for I think 8 years, and then she's been working at the high school for 36 years.
Wow. So
she's been teaching for a long time, right? And it just amazes me that someone can have such longevity. Do you plan to teach for that long?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I'm gonna have to teach till I retire, and probably then some.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it. I say that, but I could see myself teaching that long.
Mm-hmm. When did you decide that you wanted to become a teacher?
I think, a couple of years after I got to Emory, it always kind of been in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got to Emory, and I took dual enrollment biology and dual enrollment English. So freshman year, I got to jump right into a bunch of history classes, and I got hooked. And so my first 2 years at Emory, I was just pursuing a history degree.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized at some point, I'm like, oh yeah, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
And teaching's the first thing that popped up. And then I didn't know anything about, what do I have to do to be a teacher?
Right.
So I had to talk to my course advisor and get enrolled into the education program.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got enrolled, then I got to start taking early childhood development and
psychology and
all
stuff.
those classes.
Did you have dual enrollment English with Ogle?
No, I took it with Miss Dalton.
Miss Dalton,
Shannon
yeah,
Dalton.
she used to teach it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How was it?
It was good. I had a lot of my friends in that class.
Yeah.
Because that was one of those classes where, when you get to high school, you get on a track and you get to kind of be with the same people.
Right.
Kind of just depending on where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
So I was with a lot of my friends.
That must have been the first few years she was teaching, because she worked at the Gazette before
Mm-hmm.
she came to the high school to teach English.
When did she start teaching? Do you know?
I think it may have been 05 or 06.
Okay.
So it was
Yeah.
the first 3 or 4 years.
Was it the Gazette or the Carroll News?
I think it was the Gazette.
Hmm.
But, yeah. Was it 111, 112 back then, or were they different?
It was a year long.
Year long, okay.
It sounds right. I think first semester was 111.
Yep.
Second was 112.
Now, but did they have a literature class at that time? A literature course?
I don't remember any literature classes. I heard y'all mention,
Yeah.
British literature.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh,
Because now they do 111 and 112 as quarter classes.
Uh-huh.
And then they do British British literature and a quarter in American literature. So it's like 4 English classes in 1 year.
Yeah.
So you get a ton of credits from it.
I don't remember if there was a literature class.
Did you have Dr. Schwink?
I did.
Yeah.
I had Dr. Schwink for my dual enrollment bio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was that? Because I hear that she was a wonderful teacher.
Yeah, it was wild. Her room, she had, aquarium. She had an aquarium.
Mm-hmm.
She had a tank for these 2 turtles, and she had a python. She had a full-size horse skeleton. Trying to think back at what I remember, really the only thing I really remember focusing on and learning was how the kidneys work. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. That is neat.
But yeah, it was another, kind of the same people that were in that bio class were in my English class. So got to be really close with everybody in that class.
You, Mr. Harmon?
I didn't have Mr. Harmon.
Okay.
I missed out.
Wow.
I knew of him. Mr. Harmon was my JV football coach.
Right, yeah.
And love him. Our JV team always did well. We'd win a majority of our games. And I think he was a really good coach.
Who all were your history teachers at
So-
the high school?
In 8th grade, I had Mr. Parker. I think he's Dr. Parker now.
Okay.
That was World 1. And then in 9th grade, I had a man, his name was Taylor Snow.
Okay.
He taught here for a couple of years, and then I think he moved on. He went to Christiansburg or Pulaski or something.
Mm-hmm.
He was a really good teacher, too. Then, I guess in 10th grade, I had... What do you take in 10th grade? Geography, maybe?
Okay. Nowadays we take economics instead.
Yeah, that wasn't required when
Mm-hmm.
we were in school. So I took, I think, World Geography with Miss Lyons.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
She still teaches.
Yep. And then I had 11th grade history with Miss Graham.
Okay.
Miss Graham. That was a good class, too. And then government with Mr. Montgomery.
Mr. McGovern,
Yeah.
And I'm Montgomery. He's the
Yeah.
cross-country coach, and I had him this past year. It was weird because he's coached me for 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
not including track. That's just 4
Yeah.
years cross-country. And it's interesting to already know somebody really well and then have them as your teacher. So that was
Yeah.
a unique experience. But did you have Kurt Sumner?
I didn't.
Oh,
No, but
missed out.
I worked with Kurt whenever my first summer after my freshman year of college, I had to find a job. My parents were like, "You're home for the summer, you can work." So I went to work for the rec department.
Right. Oh,
And-
yeah, he did that.
Yeah. And I didn't know Kurt. And then, the first thing he said, "You know how to drive a tractor?" Like, "No, hello, how are you? Do you know how to drive a tractor?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Okay, I'll show you." But yeah, working with him was fun.
Were your history teachers part of the reason that you chose to major in history? Or was it just part of the love that you developed when you were homeschooled?
Yeah, I think I already just loved history. As far as standout teachers, I remember Mr. Snow standing out the most. He was probably my favorite out of the group. Miss Lyons, she was, she was just entertaining. I think she'd be fun, but then also like, oh yeah, we got to do this.
Right.
I think the class itself, if they're not, I think history teachers get the reputation of just being boring, rambling on, just talking forever. But they were pretty good about breaking it up and doing some more conversation stuff.
I've always loved history.
Mm-hmm.
I love to read too. Have you read any David McCullough?
I haven't.
He's a very good author.
John Adams, 1776, all these different books.
Yeah, I haven't personally read any of his books. That'll change in a few weeks, but Luke is a big proponent of him.
I mean, he really got me into a lot of stuff, especially early American history. Founding Father era.
Yeah.
See, the framers.
Did you mention John Adams?
Yeah.
So you wrote a book on him, okay.
Yeah, they made a mini-series on HBO.
Yeah, I have seen a mini-series, yeah.
That's based off his book, John
Adams. Yeah. So I showed clips from that in my class.
I love that mini-series.
My favorite scene from that is the trial of the British troops during the Boston Massacre. He's got to represent these people that everybody hates and according to the law.
Right. He does the ratification speech so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the scenes in France, I think Thomas Jefferson was incredible. I mean, just everything about it. I would keep the whole episode just about that. But,
have you read any Sir Walter Isaacson?
No.
Are you familiar with him?
No.
Really?
And I'm pretty bad about that. I read what I had to read in college.
Yeah, that's true.
It didn't go out of my way. I'm bad about really just getting on YouTube or watching miniseries or documentary. I'm more visual. I like to really watch stuff.
Do you watch many history YouTube channels? Like Weird History and all these different...
Yeah.
If you had to pick a favorite time period or topic within history, what would it be?
That's a tough one, man. Teaching wise, I started teaching in Tazewell, and I got to teach World History too, and I got to teach Virginia and U.S. History. I think Virginia and U.S. History, the way the curriculum is laid out, is pretty boring. But World History, I could always get behind any category of world history. It's just more broad. It's not as narrowed down.
I'm taking a Western Civ course right now, and we're going from the very beginning to now.
Yeah.
And it's because I love U.S. history, and that's where all my focus goes to. But it's really interesting seeing that broad perspective, because everything else, ancient history, is it's murky.
Yeah.
To a lot of people.
Yeah.
To kind of get that settled out and to realize all this stuff happened before.
Yeah.
1607.
Learning early American history, like you said, has been eye-opening for me because I never took civics. Where I moved here and didn't start until 8th grade. I never took the Virginia curriculum for civics. So having to, when I got moved into that position, I really had to buckle down and try to learn all this stuff. Some of it relearned, some of it learned for the first time, but there's a lot that can be missed with early American history.
Yeah, that's certainly true. So you said you taught at Tazewell for a few years?
Just 1 year.
1 year, okay. Did you go to Carroll immediately from Tazewell?
No, there was a gap there. I taught there for a year, and then the contract wasn't renewed. I was a first-year teacher, and I was still learning. I didn't have a really good experience there, but, applied and interviewed all during that summer and just didn't get anything. So I worked third shift at Walmart for a year, and then a position opened up. Miss Hyatt was going to China.
Right. Oh,
yes.
Yeah. So
I
Mark Quisenberry called me and said, "Would you be willing to teach for a year? And we can't guarantee you anything after this year, but it's fully, it's a full contract year, not just a long-term sub." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll go."
Okay.
And that gets me in the door, Yeah. So I taught for that year, and then Bonnie Webb retired. And I don't know, she was probably gone before y'all got there. Bonnie Webb retired, and then they moved me into that spot. So
And did you come in knowing that you'd be teaching civics?
Is that what? So for Miss Hyatt, I taught world history.
Okay.
That was when she was teaching world history.
Okay. Nowadays she's teaching civics.
Yeah,
my brother has her.
Civics.
I had her for world history until I think I had her in 2020 when we shut down for COVID.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know that she switched.
Yeah. They had just cut down. There were 3 world history teachers.
Wow.
And then they just cut it down to 2.
I had Mr. Hash.
Yeah.
So.
Mr. Hash, Miss Frazier's there, and then was Miss Hyatt the other one, I guess?
Yeah. She is Mr. Andrews still teaching?
What's this class called? I always want to say home ec. It's not home ec anymore.
It's like family
consumer sciences. Yes,
yeah.
He's still there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm kind of disappointed because I only had him for a day. Because when I had him in 7th grade, and we were doing the quarter system, you know.
Oh yeah, so you missed the whole quarter.
Yep, because I had him that last quarter of my 7th grade year when COVID happened.
I had him for 2 years.
Yeah.
And it was great.
Yeah.
A lot of people had him. A lot of people
disliked him.
Yeah.
But I always got along with him very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought his class was interesting.
Yeah.
Back to replacing Miss Hyatt.
Mm-hmm.
Were you nervous for coming in and replacing a teacher like that and not having a guaranteed job after that year?
Yeah. I was nervous about it for a little while, and then once I got into teaching, that, I can only focus on so many things at once. Mm-hmm. And so I just really focused on that. And then by the end of the school year, it wasn't like there was any downtime. Right. It was by the end of the school year, Bonnie had announced her retirement. And then I still had to interview for the job.
Right.
But I interviewed and they gave it to me.
Yeah, that's exciting.
It was a crazy couple of years because, I came out of college and I got hired the summer after I graduated.
Right.
And then I taught World History 2 and Virginia and U.S. I taught 2 classes at Tazewell. Oh. And that was a lot for, my first year teaching.
Yeah, right.
They were on a period schedule, so I had those kids for the whole year. Mm-hmm. And then, that off year, and then I came in, and now I'm teaching World 1 for Miss Hyatt. So I had to relearn all of this stuff, teach that for a year. And now I've got to teach civics. Now I've got to relearn all of this civics. Mm-hmm. And now that I'm in civics, I love it because at first I was like, I don't know if I want to teach this class. It's about government.
Did you have any interest in government before?
None at all. And I'll honestly say, out of all my history classes, Montgomery's government class was probably the one I did the worst in, just because I'm 17 years old and I didn't really care,
right.
Especially about that stuff. I will say the best thing we did in that class was the real life simulation. I don't know if he still does that, but basically you got to pick a career and then you get a salary and then you have to balance a budget.
Wow.
That was the most interesting thing I remember from that class. I don't
think he still does that. And we had him, the dual enrollment through Withfield is an online course. He just kind of proctored it. Mm-hmm. So he didn't actually get to really teach us much, but I don't think they're doing that anymore.
Wow.
So
I do feel kind of gypped because, like I mentioned earlier, COVID happened my 7th grade year, and 7th grade is the civics year in middle school. And I had civics the 2nd semester, so I only got half a civics education.
Yeah.
And that was also the year that Miss Marshall, my teacher, was pregnant. So she left, and it was a whole mess. Yeah. So I do wish that I could go back in time and really learn the civics
just get your brother's stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I didn't do that.
The whole year was a mess. It really was. Yeah. Did you go to DC with us?
I did. I went to DC twice.
That 2019 year?
That sounds right. I think I went in 19, and then did we go in 20 or did we go in 18? Well,
I was in 8th grade, 2019.
I don't think you went 20 because I would have been an 8th grader, and I was very upset that we didn't get to go.
Yeah, so I went.
I think that last year was
18 and 19.
Yeah, I love that. I wish they'd bring that back because obviously we take 8th graders, but I get to bug all the former students. Mm-hmm. Like, do you remember this? Do you remember this? So.
Did you volunteer to go to DC?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you enjoyed it?
I do enjoy it.
That was a good trip. I mean, you really get to spend a few days just hitting all the highlights. And I could have spent 2 weeks. Easily. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, you can go as deep as you want to go with it, which is kind of what makes it cool.
Yeah.
Kind of hit COVID a little bit. Me and him were both in middle school at the time. And I remember, I think it was March 13th when we got out.
It was a Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th. And people were talking about it I think the previous night the NBA shut down. And the next day it was like a whole big thing. I remember they told us in the release class, and everybody was running through the hallways. I remember it was like paper was going everywhere. It's like out of a movie or something. It was just craziness. And you were teaching at the middle school at that time. Can you give us a little bit of like a behind the scenes look at what was going on?
Yeah, so it was wild at first because a lot of us were just unsure. I think that feeling of being unsure, I think, hit me a little bit hard because I'm like, what happens if school really shuts down? I'm out of a job,
Right.
And then they told us that we would be doing virtual work. And I think from my perspective, I was lucky enough to have already been using Google Classroom a fair amount.
Yeah.
I think it hit a lot of our older teachers a little bit harder in trying to learn a new skill to teach during a pandemic, and I think trying to set your expectations, because that these kids are at home now.
Right.
Are they going to do anything? I posted work and I posted all of my notes, and by the early days of COVID, we weren't doing like video recording yet. So it was mainly just, here's the stuff, read it, answer these questions. So I know they didn't, I don't think even half of the kids turned in work.
I know you probably did. I always did because I was just bored.
Yeah.
So, it honestly gave me something to
look forward to. And
past the days. It's just weird.
Us kids were freaked out too because everything is shut down randomly. And it did give me a sense of normalcy to have some school to do, even if I didn't necessarily like doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, you really got the sense. You've taught history. You're really experiencing world history. I mean, I don't think this ever happened in the history of the world. The whole world shut down.
Yeah.
Which is, when you think about it, in 100 years, people will be studying that. I mean,
that's what blows my mind now about September 11th. Right. That is one of those events that when it passes, I remind my kids what it was like, and I forget they have no concept.
Right.
It's and that makes me think about what history we really get, things that we didn't experience. We're not really getting the full thing or the
lost in translation,
the whole scope of it. These seventh graders, they have no clue. They have little ideas, but they just don't, I think, understand the full gravity of it.
Do you remember where you were on September 11th?
I always tell them the story. I'm like, I can remember everything about that day. I just remember we had a little coffee table in front of the TV, and again, I was homeschooled, so I wasn't in any rush to get my work done. I was eating my cereal, watching whatever on TV. I don't even remember what it was, probably cartoons or something. And then I remember, Dad running in and turning on the news. And then I was like, oh, it wasn't a big deal. At first, I was 9 years old. Wasn't really paying attention to it. Right. And then when I saw my parents' reaction, that's when I was like, oh, this is serious.
Yeah.
Something's happening. And then, seeing the second plane hit was wild. Because that, they had caught it, they had turned it on, and we're watching the news live before the second plane had hit. And then, like, oh, this is not an accident. Because, when the news was on, everybody was like, it's an accident, the plane just crashed. And then you see the second one intentionally flying, and it's like, oh, no.
This is purposeful.
And then the one goes down in Pennsylvania, and then the Pentagon gets hit.
Right.
It's like, oh, we are under attack.
Right.
And they said, look at it. And the future is a lot different than the actual experience. Because at the time, nobody knew if there was going to be attacks on like subways and attacks on all sorts of stuff. I mean, they thought it could have been.
I think they had a few anthrax scares too.
Yeah, I remember anthrax being a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they said it was just experiencing at that time was a whole different story than it was.
And and that was my first exposure to it. But I remember talking to my parents and like, oh yeah, they had already tried to put a bomb underneath the Trade Center.
In 91, I think it killed, I'm not going to say the number, but it killed a few people.
Yeah, so I mean, it wasn't anything new, but it's wild. That was, my first exposure to it.
Can you draw any parallels in how you felt from 9/11 to when COVID hit?
I mean, I don't,
You were young.
Yeah, I was young, but I don't know. I think my sense of fear during the pandemic wasn't as high.
Yeah.
Wasn't that afraid. I mean, I think, it was a sickness, and from what I learned about it, it's going to affect everybody. Everybody's probably going to get it. And it was, it's really, it's bad for older people. That's really what I kind of remember. But I just remember my grandparents just, staying at home and, following the rules, doing what they're supposed to. But I don't think it worried me at all.
I think one of the most shocking things was the whole response to it.
Yeah.
That was, that's what really kind of made it surreal.
Yeah.
I guess that's the only word you can really use for it. It's really surreal. I mean, all bets were off. I remember, did y'all know that we were shutting down for the rest of the school year before we did? Because I knew the governor came. I remember watching it. And I said, we're just going to be out for like 2 or 3 more weeks. And he said, the rest of the academic school year. I was like, oh my God. I
think when they first shut down, it was going to be 2 weeks. And then they extended it for 2 more weeks. And then after the second extension, it was like, oh no, we're done.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, okay.
Because it's weird to be in early March and you're out of school for summer. I mean, it was just, and we were going to go back in the fall. I mean, going back 2 days a week, but that's not really, I mean, you're basically.
I think the parallels that I was going back thinking about what you said, I think it was crazy kind of how politicized COVID got.
Right.
It got a little out of hand. I think people overreacted and freaked out. But then when I think back to 9/11, that was one of those things where every house in my neighborhood had an American flag.
Right.
I actually think it might have had the opposite. And maybe it was just in my community. I know there's people that are pretty avid about our involvement after 9/11 and their views on that. But it seemed at the time, being a little kid, like everybody was actually more brought together because of that.
Yeah. You had to unite against the threat.
Yeah.
And I guess with COVID, for the first 48 hours, people were pretty united. And then after that, it was craziness.
Yeah.
And that was kind of sad, too, because that could have been really a time where everybody kind of strengthened the nation. Not really, but it ended up not being that way.
I think in some ways it was good. I think a lot of families got good quality time with each other, or hopefully they did.
Yeah,
I saw that as it's just me and my wife, but that was a time where, God, I got to spend all day with her. My wife got laid off from her job, and she was home all day. I was home all day. It was a good time. It sounds bad, but I kind of enjoyed parts of it.
Yeah. I've never read more in my life. I think I read the whole Harry Potter series in like March and April. And just sitting outside. I mean, I got to sit outside all day.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful that spring. Beautiful.
No restrictions on going outside.
So, yeah, I mean, there were some parts that were great. But I just thought that was interesting from your perspective because we got to see it from a certain point of view. I guess you did too. And the grading system.
Yeah.
That was
pass-fail.
Yeah. And how do you fail a kid?
Yeah.
How do you make yourself fail a kid? I couldn't. There's not, I had kids that didn't do any work, but can you blame them?
Yeah. I mean, it was just crazy.
It's just a reset. Just reset and let's figure this out later.
Yeah. Coming back from COVID that next year, what was that kind of like the whole 2 days a week for y'all?
I think I liked it because I liked having Wednesdays. I won't say off. I wasn't off, but that's when I would grade. I think that was having that time to grade and plan and print and do what I needed to do helped a lot. I don't think the kids got as much out of it. 2 days. My class is a semester class, and it's a lot of information.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think they could. I couldn't have done anything with them.
And once you're in school, though, for those 2 days, you're just kind of there.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, you get a 5-day weekend. Almost.
It was a hard adjustment coming back.
And fighting for a 7th grader's attention is hard enough when they're not wearing a mask.
Right.
And now they're just constantly complaining, and they're constantly uncomfortable. It's just no place to try to learn, Yeah.
Or I guess we came back for 2 days a week until mid-November. And then we had like 1 week where we were 4 days, and then we're out till like February. Yeah. So we're shutting down again the second time.
Yeah.
And that second time was a lot different because all the teachers expected it was a whole different ordeal.
I think we had our stuff together by that point.
Yeah. So I guess some people thought they could kind of, it was going to be like part 1 again, and it wasn't.
Somewhat expected for it. Well, you play a very important role in my life.
Thanks.
You're a swim coach on the swim team for the high school. How'd you get involved with that? Because the swim team was only 7 or 8 years old.
So my sister was my sister and Joy were the first two coaches. My sister, she'd been dating this guy through college, and they get married and they moved to Giles. So she moved out of Carroll, and Joy was looking for another coach, and she just reached out to me, and just because of my sister. And I can remember she asked me if I'd want to help swim coach, and I was like, well, I really don't know anything. Like, I swam for 2 years, and I was just athletic enough to get by. I didn't know all the technical stuff that my sister did, and I think my sister knows a whole lot more than I do. And she mentioned needing a male coach. It's a co-ed sport, kind of helps to have males and a female coach. But she just asked me, and I thought about it for a second, and I was already coaching football at that time, and I really enjoyed my time after football. Getting out of school and not having things to do. But it's a short season, and gave it a shot, and then fell in love with it. I love it now. It's fun to see kids who don't, who one either never heard of the sport, or maybe it's something that they can do where they couldn't do another sport. I could never play baseball. I could never play basketball, but I got lucky with football and swim. Yeah.
It's exciting. Swim is a very short 4 months, but it's the best 4 months of the year.
Yeah.
Have you thought about swimming for health and fitness? Because there's a big joke on the swimming team that if we win regionals, that you and Joy will swim in a practice. Have you thought about picking it up again?
I thought about it, and I'll tell you, last year, maybe it was, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before last, Sheldon convinced me to come in and swim. And so I went a couple of mornings early, 5 in the morning before school, did it for a little bit, and then I just kind of fell off, And it's hard, I make a joke all the time, I played at Emory, and we were working out at 5 o'clock in the morning just about every day. And you've got somebody forcing you to do it for so long. I did it for 4 years, and now the thought of getting up at 5 in the morning to go work out, just couldn't do it now.
Have you explored running or cycling?
I would run on the treadmill, and usually I'll pick that up after swim, because then I'll spend about a week where I'm like, I get to go home immediately after school, or I can stay after in grade, and then I'm like, well, now I have to find something to do, and so I'll work out for a couple of months, and then summer comes around and I don't get back on the horse.
Do you like the treadmill?
I like the elliptical better. Yeah.
Me and him, I've run on a few times, but I'm not. I just like going outside. Have you thought about running like the Beaver Dam Trail or up through town or something? Yeah,
I think being moving somewhere is better.
Yeah.
And going back again to COVID, that was one of the things that me and my wife were able to do. Is we lived in Radford at the time. You have Bissett Park, and Bissett Park has got a whole long stretch of track.
We actually ran a cross country bit there.
Yeah.
The COVID year. They had it's almost like a track meet. It was like a half. I think you were in middle school at that time, but. It's a pretty little park down there.
Yeah, and it's big enough to where, if I'm running, I feel like I've got to be going somewhere.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if I could do laps and see the same thing over and over again, but I think that's the best thing that I liked about it is doing that. And there's also another. It's more of a hiking trail. You couldn't run it because it's up and down, but right across from Bissett Park.
Okay.
And I couldn't think of the name of that one.
Sure. So, were you married when you first started teaching?
No, and when I was in Tazewell, I waited until I got my first big boy job before I went and bought a ring. So I was living in a little apartment up there, and I got my first couple of paychecks from there, and then went ahead and bought a ring, and then I proposed. Gosh, when did I propose? I proposed in December. So yeah, I started teaching in August and then proposed in December, and
CCHS?
Yeah. We were engaged for a while. Got married in 2017. Gosh, I'm not going to think too long on that.
Congratulations.
So that's some pretty big life changes right there, all centered around each other.
Yeah.
I guess that's what kind of that time of life is meant for.
Now I'm getting to the point that where I get up every morning and I make my coffee and I'm like, God, same thing. now you're just stuck in that loop.
Yeah. For the next 20 years.
Yeah.
That is kind of scary. Have you given any thought to how your life as a teacher, you kind of get stuck in a rut sometimes? Or maybe not a rut, but you certainly have a routine.
Yeah, it's a routine, and the routine part of it is good. The thing that makes it is the different kids.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it feel like it's not the same job.
Yeah.
Because every year, kids are so different. You know, I think that's what keeps me not feeling bad about it. You know, I'm not down on that.
Right.
But it's fun to meet new kids every year, or every semester even.
Because you have it better because your class is a semester class. You don't have a group for a year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've touched on this, but not dealing with kids, but being around kids all the time.
Yeah.
Was that a learning curve for you?
I don't think so. I think that was, I think I started teaching high schoolers, and that was not that big of a deal because I was just out of college. I was like 22 years old.
Yeah.
And I taught, 10th graders and 11th graders. So it was more relatable. So I was pretty comfortable with them. And then I moved down to 8th grade, and there was a little bit of a difference. But I will say the 8th graders that I had were incredibly intelligent. I did not have to work hard with them. Mm-hmm. I had Sheldon, Leonard, and Bailey Vaughn.
So they were your first group?
Yeah, they were my first group at Carroll.
Yeah.
And I taught 3 honors classes. And then second semester, I think I only had 1 honors class.
Okay.
But, they were well ahead of the curve, and they were, easy to teach.
Yeah.
Moving down to 7th grade was a whole different animal.
Yeah. I can definitely notice a big difference for myself between 7th and 8th grade. Mm-hmm. Even though mine was a little bit skewed because of COVID, I just felt more mature. Mm-hmm.
There's a big, and even you can even watch the kids by semester change. Your first semester kids are still a little bit immature. Mm-hmm. They're still in that kind of 6th grade mentality. Right. And then, second semester comes around and you get a whole different group of kids. They are more comfortable, so they're more open, they're easier to talk to, easier to teach, I think. Mm-hmm. But, yeah.
But that's a really prime time for growing right there. Or even, I guess, developing as a person. Right?
Yeah. There's a lot that happens that they don't even realize that they're doing it. Mm-hmm. That,
I kind of think it's like that with your 10th and 11th grade year of high school, too.
Yeah.
Big changes.
Yeah. People say that, but I haven't really felt that yet for 11th grade. I think 10th grade was my year for changes.
I think this year too, from junior to senior year, is a different kind of. I don't know. You just feel more.
Yeah.
Even first and second semester. I mean, second semester of your senior year, you're kind of.
Yeah. It's like cruising.
What's going to happen after this?
Yeah.
You're kind of that's the mentality of.
And I think y'all's generation has an advantage where you get to go ahead and start taking dual enrollment classes way earlier than we did. I don't think you could take dual enrollment until your senior year. When I was in high school.
So they didn't have the associate's degree program at that time?
Mm-mm.
I took 3 dual enrollment classes my 10th grade year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that is what kind of forces you to, get it together.
Right.
Because if you're willing to take those classes, then you're already on your path. You already kind of have yourself figured out.
Yeah.
My senior year was, I'm going to take 2 dual enrollment classes.
Yeah.
Now it's time to be serious.
Right. Did you find that there was a similar maturity transition in college?
Oh, that was not. I wasn't ready for college at all.
No.
No. I took dual enrollment classes, but I think that was, the early days of their dual enrollment, and I don't think it was as strenuous as it probably could have been.
Sure.
I learned some, valuable skills. Me and Miss Dalton were actually talking on the bus about APA. She taught me all about APA, and then I got into my history classes, and they're like, we don't use APA.
Oh, yeah. I remember that conversation.
Yeah. We use
last week.
We use Chicago.
Yeah.
Chicago, and it's basically you cite all your sources with a little subscript, a little number, and then you cite it at the bottom of the page. So I had to relearn that. I was not prepared at all. Freshman year was rough, and then, sophomore year I started to pull it together, and then by my junior year, when I got into the education program, I think I was doing better. My senior year, I even retook some of the classes from my freshman year. And, ended up making A's in them. Yeah. See, it wasn't that bad.
Did you do that just to prove it to yourself that you could handle it, or to better GPA?
Part of it was my GPA, trying to get my GPA up, but at the same time, they were classes that were necessary.
Yeah.
One of them was a world geography class, that I think was necessary for my major that I failed.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
I always kind of wondered this, and we've interviewed a few teachers, but we haven't asked this question. What does your summers look like?
Yeah.
Well, with football, there's football workouts about 3 days a week. Just going out and working with the kickers for those 3 days. But every other day, I'm not doing much. I'm pretty content to just watch a documentary. Like I said, I'm not real big on reading, but just like being at home.
You mentioned documentaries. Do you have any favorites?
Right now I'm kind of in the middle of the new one that just came out on Netflix. It's I don't think it's not called World War II in color, but it's.
I love those series. It's I know what you're talking about.
The
it's
newest,
Frontlines.
Yeah. The newest one it's got a lot of footage that I've never seen.
Yeah.
Just different perspectives. Again, it's the same story I've heard 100 times, but
I think this is the third of those series that came out.
Yeah.
They had 2 of them already on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
I've probably watched them 10 times a piece.
Yeah.
Because I put them on as I'm going to bed. Kind
Yeah.
of. It's the same stories, but they're good stories.
Mm-hmm.
And then, did you watch The Shall Not Grow Old? It was on.
No.
It was on Netflix for all summer. It got taken off.
Oh.
But it's World War One,
Okay.
and it was made by Peter Jackson. He made the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And the footage was incredible.
Oh wow. I'll have to look up that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of teachers at the high school will tell their students that they consider themselves to be more than teachers, that they consider themselves to be friends for their students and mentors.
Yeah.
Do you have the same mindset?
I don't think I do. I don't think that's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
I think that just happens on its own.
Yeah.
Because I've always had kids tell me I'm their favorite teacher and all of this stuff, and I just don't. I don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
They tell me things all the time. And I'm like, I'm not that great. I'm really, that sounds bad, but my own opinion of myself is I don't think I do everything that I'm supposed to. During the summer, you mentioned during the summer, I should be doing some professional development or reading a book or just trying to become better. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. In some ways, I do get along with, just about all my kids, but at the same time, I don't see how I could be a role model. I don't know.
How you saw a difference in your kids' behavior from before COVID and after?
Ooh, little bit.
A little bit. Okay.
A lot of people a lot of other teachers try to blame things that are happening now on COVID, but I can tell you right now, from a 7th grade teacher perspective, my kids are not that much different from before COVID. I have the same issues, I have the same problems, the same kind of, things that I deal with before COVID.
Mm-hmm. Has the county's new phone policy played a role in that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's changed, absolutely. I will say that from my perspective has been one of the greatest things that could have happened. And like I said, me, speaking about my style of teaching is I'm not as strict as I should be.
Sure.
And I'm not as disciplined as I should be. And one of the phones beforehand weren't something that I really concerned myself with.
Yeah.
But I always knew some of them had their phones. But now where it's a county policy and everybody's on board, it's not like, well, I'm going to go to so-and-so's class and be able to use my phone. I think we're all following it like we should, and I think it's working. And I like it. I think it's helped my kids a ton.
Yeah. It was controversial, to say the least, when implemented.
Yeah, I know. And you're a student that is responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And you're being held subject to everybody else's, failings. It's tough.
Yeah,
I know, that's the thing is some kids can handle it, some cannot.
I think it's probably been an overall net positive, though. I think you're right.
It was weird to see at the beginning of school. I had some online classes in the library,
mm-hmm.
and those WCC classes started about 2 weeks after we started school.
Mm-hmm.
So we had 2 weeks of free time.
Yeah.
And I walked in and everybody was reading a book. I said, It's funny how quick the people will go back to doing things they did beforehand.
Yeah.
That's no longer a thing, though, because kids have figured out how to open up Hulu on their Chromebooks. and they now watch Hulu instead. But
Yeah, but for a while there,
they were reading. It was
reading
nice.
and people handled it well. And
mm-hmm.
just talking to each other, which is a good skill to have.
Yeah.
It is interesting to see how some kids won't put their phones in the pouches, and it's very obvious that they don't.
Yeah.
But they're still not on them during class. So it achieves the same thing.
I have not noticed that at all.
I think at the high school it's probably more prevalent.
Yeah. I know the biggest problem that the schools have now is with our 8th graders. They're pretty bad about that. Just not putting it in there. Yeah. But also not being on it. But still, if they have them, they want them in the pouches. Right. I get 7th graders, they come off of the 6th grade classes where the 6th grade classes are very strict.
Yes.
And very, you can't have your phone even in the hallway or at lunch.
Right.
So it's pretty easy taking 7th graders, and piggybacking off of that. They were pretty good about it. I didn't meet any resistance.
Have y'all went back to lockers?
Yeah, we have lockers.
Interesting.
That's something the high school hasn't gone back to, and I'm glad.
I'm glad too.
Are they planning on going back to it next year?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah. I think the 6th graders primarily use them more than anybody.
Yeah.
With 7th graders, I tell my kids, I'm like, just bring your whole backpack. I don't care if you bring your bags to class. Mm-hmm. Some teachers have rules where they don't want bags in the aisles.
Yeah.
But my thing is, if you have a locker that you're using, that's an excuse to leave. Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's always, and going back to the cell phone thing, I was worried that, kids were just going to leave their phones in the locker and just be like, can I go to my locker? I left my pencil. I left my Chromebook. I left, my notebook, whatever. Because I had seen that in the past as an excuse to get out of class.
Right.
I haven't noticed it at all. It's been great.
I have to take this part out. Kids will get some ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I'm probably going to still be teaching civics. Yeah. We'll have gone through a few elections.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that. Do you think your job will be easier having that example of the national election happen?
Yeah. I always like election years.
Yeah.
There's way more content out there that I can show the kids. And
I guess interest is peaked too.
I went through civics in an election year too, and I can definitely say it helped a ton.
Yeah. And when it's not an election year, they could care less.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting.
And then they're so young beforehand too. So our last election was 2020. Mm-hmm. Most of my kids don't have very strong opinions, which is surprising because the lead up, I taught in Tazewell in 2015, right before the 2016 election. That was very opinionated.
I was in 4th grade, but I still remember everybody talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, especially the past few elections have been just insanely opinionated. I guess it's been like that throughout history, but it seems like, especially 2016. 2020, I think everybody was still kind of, everything was crazy from COVID, and everybody was just tired. Mm-hmm. So it was like, okay.
Yeah.
But 2016, I remember being really, really pumped up. And I think this year's going to be really, really crazy too. Because you can already kind of tell it's going to be nuts.
Do you remember your first time voting? Because Luke and I just registered to vote a few weeks ago.
Yeah, my first, I think the first time I voted was in a local election. It was in Carroll, and it was when J.B. Gardner was running for sheriff.
Yeah.
And then the first presidential race I voted in would have been 2016. Would have been that election.
Well, because our first was going to be the presidential primaries and then the general, which is kind of, I'm happy that it kind of turns out that way.
Yeah.
It makes the whole experience much more.
So I feel like I'm participating in democracy.
Yeah.
I am.
And it's really not as, that's the thing is, trying to, I always give extra credit in my class. And like, if you, go with your parents to the polling location if you can. It's just extra credit. Go see what it's all about. Go see all the signs. And, so many of them are just like, my parents don't vote. My parents don't vote. I'd say the overwhelming majority say they don't vote.
This November, Luke and I worked the polls on election day.
Oh, 2 different candidates.
Yeah.
We actually worked the Carroll County High School poll. I think it's Hillsville B. Mm-hmm. So we were campaigning for different people, but we were there opposing candidates.
Nice.
So it was an interesting experience. I think you just can't replicate that if you don't go out.
It was a rough day. We both got there at 6, and then Luke stayed a little bit longer than I did, but it's hard work out there.
Mm-hmm. I think we said so. I think it's like 3 or 4 o'clock. So I mean, just handing out stuff a day and talking to people, and a lot of times people don't really want to hear it. So.
Yeah.
And we did learn throughout the day what worked, what didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Just an experience, a learning experience. I think sometimes being in school, I know being in school is a lot different than actually going to. So you see civics and you see all stuff, but going out and actually seeing poll workers and people campaigning or meeting public officials or going to court or something like that, it's a whole different kind of.
We just got finished in my class talking about civic duties and civic responsibilities. I don't know if any of y'all remember those, but one of the responsibilities was participating in campaigns. And I'm like, that's, you don't have to. You're not required by law. You're not going to get in trouble if you don't, but you should.
Yeah.
You should.
Yeah. Well, as we're wrapping up, we have a series of questions that we ask every interviewee.
All right.
Sure you're familiar with them.
Uh-huh.
I'll go first. What advice do you have to younger generations who might want to be a teacher? What would you say to them?
It changes every year.
Yeah.
You're never going to learn anything in a classroom as far as college-wise. Everything you learn will be by experience. So don't expect to know everything when you first try out or when you first start teaching. You're gonna take some bumps, and you're gonna have to learn how to do it in a way that works for you.
Yeah.
I think you can't find a cookie cutter mold of a teacher. Yeah.
This next question runs along the same vein as Ethan's, but it's a little bit
different.
It's different.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for young adults, 18, 19 years old, just making their way in the world? They don't really know what's going on.
I still haven't figured that out yet either. I think, I think stay close to people. Stay close to the people who really matter instead of people you want, I think, to be around or with. You can't force anybody to be on your side. I think find the people that really do matter and stick with them. Yeah.
Our last question, it's a bit of a cliche, but we ask every interviewee, and we find it to be very indicative of a person's true character, and that is, what is the meaning of life to you, personally?
I think it goes back to the same thing, is find a person or find some people that matter the most to you and be around those people as much as you can. I think just relationships, I guess that's an easy way to sum it up. Have good relationships with people. Find a way to make your relationships work with people that aren't, I guess, sometimes, you kind of have to space yourself from certain people, but, no relationship works perfectly all the time. But, if it works, stick with that person. I think relationships in general are the very fabric of us as people. We started building cities together, and it's been the same ever since. Yeah.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you guys.
We've really enjoyed this. It's been one of the best interviews that we've ever had.
Oh, well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was fun.